title is perhaps the best clue for understanding this poem. Stabat Mater translates from Latin into English as the Mother Stood, and is a religious Catholic reference to the sorrows of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The use of Latin gives the poem a very old, archaic and stuffy feel, and possibly ties it in with the themes of conflict between the old and the traditional and the new and the young in this poem, the conflict that seems to exist between the old husband and the new wife and the young mother. Another key clue for understanding this poem is its choice of form. Sam Hunt, the poet, has chosen to use a sonnet, and this is a deeply ironic choice because, as the title suggests, the subject is more to do with suffering than it is to do with traditional love, as you would expect from a sonnet. The clash between the title and the form of this poem suggests that this poem is very cynical about love. But it could also be a warning about the perils of a bad marriage, as the final concluding couplet makes clear. Once marriage has been undertaken, there is no return. And in fact, this is a poem about a marriage with a big age difference. However, for those who know the poet Sam Hunt, his poems are often light-hearted and humorous, and perhaps this is simply a poem about the trials and tribulations of married life that isn't meant to be taken too seriously, and is, as the poet says, just a game. The first quatrain concerns the fact that my mother called my father Mr. Hunt. The formality of this opening line, depicted by the quotation marks, captures the rather distant and alienated relationship within this family. Its unemotional tone is further highlighted when the reader finds out that I learned this from a book she'd inscribed, rather than from a personal conversation the two had had together. The book could have been a sentimental gift, but the convention and reserve of the inscription implies the emotion is artificial, disingenuous, and suspiciously word-perfect. However, the perfect rhyme of life and wife perhaps deflates the serious tone and perhaps mocks the times when wives were expected to be subservient to their husbands. In addition, this mocking tone is further emphasised by the use of the possessive pronoun his in his loving wife. It seems slightly unnatural and would have been perhaps a more natural tone to have put from your loving wife. Another connotation that springs from the perfect rhyme of life and wife is that perhaps marriage was a life sentence for women only a few generations ago. From the second quatrain, we learn that the person's mother is significantly younger than his father. Indeed, his father is older than his grandfather. The age gap reminds us of a time when women were used as paternal property for advancing family politics, and the bride would often be a child bride given to an older and richer man in order to form an alliance. The quotation, "He made her seem so small," could be both figuratively and literally true. However, it is ambiguous as to whether this was due to the father's condescending attitude, or whether she literally was just a small child at the time, or whether the relationship was genuinely a loving one between two people of contrasting ages. The repeated references to the first few years and at first emphasise how hard it had been for the mother as she adapted to married life, and how to act with her husband or even in an adult relationship. Embarrassment pervades both the marriage and the mother-son relationship. The third quatrain sees a significant shift into the present tense, and again it uses ironic humour to illustrate the relationship. Now, in a different way, she calls my father every other sort of name. The tone is tongue-in-cheek and implies that the respect she once had has now become contemptuous and familiar. The suggestion is that she now calls him derogatory names as he moves into his senior, if not senile, years. The father is not given a voice, and his absence leaves him slightly distanced. Even so, There is a hint and a tone of affection from the mother as she guides her husband through old age. But the final line, "Sometimes she turns to me as if it were a game," implies that the relationship is a facade and completely facile. The perfect rhyme between name and game is a pun directed back to the first stanza and the name Mr. Hunt, and implies the idea that all marriage consists of is simply changing names. Finally, the ellipsis at the end of the stanza creates a huge dramatic pause that leads into the concluding couplet. The final two lines conform to the sonic convention of using a rhyming couplet. The rhyme of learn and return emphasizes the harsh finality of the relationship and the marriage that the mother had. Indeed, it implies a sense of indoctrination. She must walk away and know there's no return. But from what is she walking away from? The reader is not explicitly told. A number of possibilities abound. Is it freedom or innocence? Alternatively, the walk away could be seen more positively as walking away from the self and towards the unbreakable and eternal bonds of marriage. The poem reveals very little evidence for either argument, and perhaps the note of warning or advice is simply a very Catholic message that life is full of suffering and our only duty is to stand up straight. In other words, to act virtuously. What is important is that you have shown some personal engagement with this poem. Try to pick out one or two ideas in each stanza and show that you have thought about it for yourself. Good luck.